Welcome, everybody. SF Live episode 192. It is Tuesday, and I'll be joined by Darrell Rader in a few short seconds. He's the president and CEO of Minaurum, and they're just going through a bought deal. They're restarting drilling in Mexico, so lots to talk about with him, and quite excited to switch over to him in a few short seconds and to get the down low on what's happening and what they're up to. And before we do that, though, be reminded this is an interactive format. So if you have any questions for this company, and for Darrell in particular, obviously, make sure to put them either in the YouTube chat or use the hashtag function. And we highlight that here on the screen as well. Use hashtag AskMGG. That's the company's ticker on the Toronto Stock Exchange as well. So two birds, one stone. Use it on Twitter and to get your questions in, because we want to make it as interactive as possible, as we are still trying to replicate the physical format as much as possible. So we still can't meet, but we have. And of course, be reminded to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Turn on that bell notification as well. All our interviews are live. Make sure to use that to your advantage and hit that. You'll get push notifications sent to your screens on the phone or on your computer. So that's that. And now let me switch over to Darrell. Wonderful. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Kai. I'm doing well, thank you.
No, it's great to have you on. We met a couple times at various conferences, but we haven't talked in a while. So I'm quite curious to get the latest scoop from Minaurum and what you guys been up to. But before we dive into some details, talk about the financing and restarted drilling, give us a quick 30, 60-second overview of the company, and then we'll get into the details.
Okay, yeah, very briefly, sort of the concept behind Minaurum was we were originally formed as a mag gold concept. We had a number of the same founders as mag silver, notably Peter McGaw and some of the financiers, and we wanted to do in the gold space what mag did in the silver space. So what we were looking for right off the bat is tier one, early stage discoveries, doing it from the grassroots level, looking for district scale projects. On the gold side, we wanted to see at least sort of multi-million ounce potential. On the silver side, at least 100 million ounce potential. And because we were doing it from the early stage, we've been always extremely aggressive on the drill bit. We're not one of these companies that, pokes in a nice hole, then drills everything to Swiss cheese. We step out quickly because we want to figure out how big these projects are. So over the last 10 years, we've put about 7-8 projects through the ringer. We've made several discoveries, most notably the Alamos Silver discovery, which is our flagship project now. We dropped a bunch of the projects that we hit smoke on or didn't quite get the results. We've replenished the pipeline, and we've also done a few JVs of our non-core projects now. But we're focused on Alamos Silver in Sonora State.
Okay, great. And to get on the same level as well, let's talk cap structure. I think that evens the playing field. Run us through the cap structure right now, and then we'll also talk about the bought deal happening.
So yeah, we have about 340 million shares issued and outstanding before the close of the bought deal. I would say about 60% is institutionally held. Another 20% is high net worth family offices, primarily in Europe. We are more heavily sort of European shareholder based, but we're coming back into the U.S. And this financing that we're doing now is a way of getting some of the U.S. institutions placed. For instance, one of the groups that we have right now in the U.S. is a group like the SILJ, the Silver Junior ETF on the New York Exchange. We have a lot of the Sprott entities already in the stock, but there's still a far way to go. And we're chasing those primary silver players that back Peter McGaw at MAG and other groups.
Okay, that lends the question, and now I'm jumping around it a little bit, but you mentioned that while you're focusing on silver, your company's called Minaurum Gold. Is there a disconnect? Are we going to see a name change soon?
We've talked about it. I'm hoping it comes at some point, to be quite honest. One of the things we've discussed internally is getting a main board US listing. We are an OTCQX right now, which is pretty well as high as you go before you jump to the American, New York American or whatever they call it now. At that point, I think that'd be a critical catalyst to getting silver in our name. But it's something I think as well, when silver starts performing, breaking out, it's definitely something we're considering.
Yeah, you mentioned 340 million shares out. You're issuing roughly another 20 million shares. Is that correct in this financing? So let's say 360. Is that fully diluted, or what's the fully diluted number?
Fully diluted is about 380. So it's relatively tight. We only have about 8 million options outstanding. So we've kept things tight as far as warrants and options. Our shares outstanding, it's a little higher than we probably like. But that being said, I've been in this business 22 years. I've never done a rollback, and I've done some splits before. And the way we trade, because we have such a heavy institutional presence, we trade more like we have 150 out than we do over 300. And for me, things like the share structure, consolidations and things, consolidations to me are a pretty bad idea unless there's a significant catalyst. such as the market breaking out, such as getting a main board listing somewhere where you get a whole new investor base looking at your story. That could be a catalyst, but that's not really on the table right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was suggesting like for the NYSE or an even Nasdaq listing, you need to roll back 10 to 1 at least, right? You need the four. Is it $4 US, I think, even?
I
So
believe so, yes.
yeah, so you do need a higher share price there as well, and you can achieve that with the rollback. But of course, you can't roll back forever, right? So uh,
Yeah, it's the problem is we know in the junior industry it's sort of the fallback route, and in my opinion, it doesn't help much. When you're targeting retail investors with a drill story, no matter how exciting it is, if you're a $4 or $5 stock, you knock most of that retail interest right out the door. And we see ourselves having some growth potential here through the drill bit as far as share price appreciation goes. And I think our market will trade lock, stock, and barrel with a discovery.
with the bot deal closing, like I'm not sure what the timeline is. I'm sure it's going to be a couple of weeks till all the funds are in, and then they get sent your way. But with that closing, how much cash will you have in the bank, and what are use of proceeds then?
Yeah, we'll have about 12.5 million at that point. We are looking at drilling approximately 15,000 meters between now and the end of the year at the Alamos Project. On top of that, sort of Alamos is 90% of our time and money, but we are also advancing the Orifero Gold Project and our Santa Marta Copper Gold Project. So both of them will see smaller drill programs once we receive permits there, i.e. in the 2 to 3 to 4,000 meter range, but 15,000 minimum is what we're targeting at Alamos.
Gotcha. Let's dive into that a little bit more. Let's talk more Alamos. Like, run us through the project. Like, what stage is the project in, and what are you trying to achieve with the drill program?
So Alamos is in the still sort of discovery exploration stage. It's still a relatively early stage process in there. We took a bit of a different mindset to exploring the project than a lot of juniors would do. We sort of took that Mag Silver mindset of going into a historical camp, much like Mag did in the Fresnillo district in the Juanicipio project, and is go into a historical camp, figure out what there is, how big this thing could be. We came into Alamos, knowing that there were three veins that had 200 million ounces of historical production. We knew that there was a lot of leftover mineralization, but we wanted to look for new discoveries in the area. So we started drilling. We ended up finding 26 new veins outside of the three original ones. And the idea behind our first phase was as soon as we would stop drilling that vein, move on to the next, because we wanted to build an inventory and prove this was a district outside of just an isolated high-grade vein or two. And so the market found that a bit hard to understand because, we hit 7 meters of 1,800 grams silver, and then we don't drill there again for another year or two. So what we're doing now in our phase two is we're going back, we're dedicating a rig just to start, but a couple rigs eventually, to drilling off areas of known mineralization. Not to a resource level, but initially at least, but enough to the point that we get an understanding of how big this mineralized envelope can be in whatever chute we're in, we believe that we've discovered. And then we'll have 1 to 2 rigs looking for new silver chutes. The reason I mentioned silver chutes is, these are veins, they are shooty systems. But one of the things we've realized with a lot of the majors and mid-tiers that are ultimately our exit strategy, they have sort of corporate doctrines or strategies that they're looking for X number of chutes in a mineralized system. So for us, we're sort of working on that basis that we'd like to discover 4 or 5 chutes. We know we're, by the looks of it, into 2 of them. We may have discovered a third, but there's another 2 to go. And really, until we get that sort of quantity of chutes, at that point, that's when you go back and you start doing resource drilling. And that way you're drilling off 4 or 5 chutes at the same time. And then you get that resource to the kind of large, 100 million ounce kind of potential the market's looking for.
Interesting. You mentioned a couple of interesting things I need to follow up on. It's also the Max Silver model because they got Fresnillo in now in the deal. What is your business plan in that regard? Like, are you looking for it to drill it to a certain stage to make it to that joint venture stage? Do you want to sell it? And we're going to touch on the other projects in a second as well. But how do they factor into?
So the model is, we're not miners. We know what our critical mass of knowledge, let's call it that, is. We know we're explorationists. We have guys like Peter McGaw from Mag Silver fame, David Jones of Guerrero Goldfeld fame. We know how to find big deposits. We've done it before in our career. So that's our focus. And the thing is once you're onto a good deposit, and we're not at that stage yet, but we're working towards that. When you have the real deal, let's call it that. and you advance it. Inevitably, at some point, when you have the real deal, you'll start getting takeout offers. It's just how it works, you know. And part of the process here is we want to get to that stage sooner than later. And I actually think personally you can get to that stage without having a resource. I think if you have enough holes into each chute so that people can start doing back of the envelopes without us having to drill to Swiss cheese, we'll get the interest from majors. And then it comes to the point that you either decide, are we going to sell it for shares in another deal? Or are we going to bring in some kind of massive carried interest, kind of a JV where we're carried through to production? You know, you make that decision at that point. But what we really want to do is make that decision in the next 2 years, and then spin out the rest of the projects into, you know, another vehicle that the shareholders maintain control of, and then repeat the process.
Spin out the other projects. Like you mentioned, you might be doing some drilling on the other projects as well. Run us through them real quick and give us the down low on those. And you said like spinning them out. Like, is that already an option right now, or are you waiting to actually hit something first to generate some more value?
Yeah, I'd like to be onto a big discovery on the additional projects we have in the portfolio before we start talking spin outs. You know, the worst thing you can do is just to spin out for investors, you know, short-term interest kind of a thing, and then it doesn't have enough legs to stand on. So what we're looking to do is we have a pipeline of district scale projects. They're the kind of projects that we believe, as I mentioned in the beginning, have some big potential. You'll know pretty quickly when you start drilling. So, for instance, Santa Marta is a project that a few years back was JV'd by David Lowell and Lowell Copper, which became Equinox Gold. It was their flagship project. They had a few permitting issues that we've since resolved, but that is a massive VMS system that, according to guys like Dr. Jim Franklin, a co-creator of the VMS model, could be a massive discovery, but you don't know till you drill it. Orifero is a gold project we picked up not that far away from Alamos. It has a bunch of shallow drill results, everything from 30 meters of 5 grams of gold to 45 meters of 3 grams per ton gold. We believe there's a deeper underlying body that's creating all this mineralization. 2,000 meters will hit it or not. And it's those kind of projects that, you know, you can tell quickly or not if you're onto something. And if you're onto something, you let it run and you can spin it off at that point. The rest of our projects, of which we have about 7, some of which have not been announced yet to the market, we made a conscious decision earlier this year to start looking for partners for the non-core projects and advancing them. And through that, we now have 2 JVs. We have 20% carried interest in both, one with Fortuna Silver next to their San Jose mine, one with Infinitum Copper, which is the Reyna Silver team.
Okay, fantastic. All right. As a follow-up, maybe real quick, holding cost of the project, like what's your G&A then?
So the G&A, as far as salaries and everything, is very low. Our largest factor is holding costs of the project portfolio, and that's something that we're whittling away here as we get some JVs done. We're, you know, one of the largest landholders in the Guerrero Gold Belt. It's something we're in JV talks right now. So right now, on an annualized basis, I'd say our holding costs are probably around 800,000 Canadian a year. So pretty steep. If we get a deal done on Guerrero, which we anticipate getting done sometime in this calendar year, plus a few others, you'll probably see that number drop by at least half.
No, that's good to see, because, you know, dilution is not the solution in all cases, right?
Correct.
So that helps. With Alamos, like, I know drilling, I saw a press release the other day, drilling is about to start. Can you run us through it? Because I've seen also a press release that you stopped drilling quite a while ago.
Yes.
And run us through the background of that, because I asked you before we went live, like, yeah, of course, COVID is a factor, but why did you decide to completely stop work? Well, like, I have at least seen other companies do some work, drill a
Yes.
little bit, maybe at reduced capacity or speed. Why'd you stop completely?
Yeah, so what happened is after COVID started up, the one thing I'll just sort of mention about our project. So the Alamos project was acquired by the same Mexican family, and they assembled Alamos. It's the same family that put together the Santa Elena project, which became Silvercrest #1. And this is a permitting and infrastructure family. And this is the same family that's doing everything but geology. They're doing drilling, mine construction, shaft sinking, permitting, community relations for Silvercrest #2 at Las Chispas. They do everything for us at Alamos except for geology there as well. So when we started up drilling in July of last year, we basically did a miniaturized version of what they did at Silvercrest, i.e. a clinic, a base camp, keeping the locals away from our employees, our contractors, making sure there was no cross-contamination. And that worked excellent until Christmas. We had a lot of positive tests from our COVID lab, but, you know, they were isolated. They had no serious issues, and that was fine. Then at Christmas time, it's traditional. Families gets together in Mexico. You had children coming back from university, families coming from a distance, and suddenly the area of Alamos, just not just where we're working, but the entire Alamos region, sort of went from a death a week to a couple deaths a day right after Christmas, and that continued at least a handful of deaths a week right through to middle of May. And so when we were watching this suddenly start to spike post Christmas, we were right away, on the ball with our community relations and permitting group, and we have a lot of locals working for us. And they asked us, please do not remobilize your drill program right now. Our elder community is pretty scared of the virus. The town of Alamos has a lot of fear because the medical system cannot handle it in this area. The number of deaths, the number of cases, lack of oxygen, lack of, critical care beds, all those kinds of things. And so we said, okay, we're not going to go in there and force our will upon the community. And in mid-May, the community finally said, okay, guys, we'd love to have you come back. We need money. We need jobs. Please come back. And so between January and basically middle of May, and same thing between March of last year and July when we resumed drilling, we basically act as a food bank. We have a system of micro loans we've set up in the communities. So, people were getting money, borrowing money as they needed it. But now, thankfully, according to our permitting and community relations group, COVID has sort of, they're past COVID in their words. In northern Mexico, what they told me is in their words, in typical Mexican fashion, they've overcome COVID through everybody catching it. And so now, you're seeing the COVID numbers drop. There's hardly any positive rates at Las Chispas anymore. And that's just because everybody has the antibodies. And so, now we're excited to get back there and resume drilling. We'll start with a couple rigs to start and ramp up from there.
Yeah. Do you have a date for us when you start drilling, or is that imminent?
It's looking probably like the first rig will be ready in 2 weeks. We're still going to do COVID testing for people coming to the project just to make sure the community still knows that we care about their well-being and their health. So the only caveat is when you're doing COVID testing like we did last year when we ramped up, one of the problems is when you ramp up and you get all your people out, you get 30 workers out and suddenly 10 of them have to go into isolation, and then you have enough for one rig. And then you have to get those 10 out of isolation or find new 10 guys to run through that system. So it takes a while to ramp up, but once you're ramped up, it goes pretty smoothly.
Fantastic. Let's run through the timeline for Alamos real quick. You said you don't want to do a resource calculation like right away. So run us through the project timeline so we can wrap our heads around it a little bit, because it sounds like you're trying to Great Bear 2.0 model.
Yeah. So, obviously we want to make this as big as we can, as quickly as we can. And, that means, yes, you're drilling out areas of known mineralization, but you're doing it at 150 meter step outs, compared to say Las Chispas, which is 25 meter step outs. There's other hot stories out there that are doing 10 to 20 meter step outs. We're at 150. That gives you a very quick idea of how big the mineralized envelope there is. But the key is really discovering that basket of silver shoots that we think are critical before we start drilling them all off simultaneously. So we're working on the basis that we think we can get to that sort of critical mass of silver shoots by the end of this year, and then probably by sometime Q2 of next year, maybe March, April, we'll get to the point where we're comfortable starting to drill off, an initial resource on a number of these shoots at the same time. As I mentioned, the worst thing you do is you focus on one, you drill off that one, and then the market says that's all that there is. We don't want to get into that. We want to first, get a whole bunch of these kind of advanced targets, drill them off simultaneously.
Gotcha. I don't want to get too technical, but do they show up in any of the geochem or IP mag surveys? Like, can you track them that way? Like, how do you identify them?
Obviously the historical ones are easy because they have mines on them and they're directly on surface. Yeah, the high grades exposed. when you go onto the neighboring veins where we're finding some of our new discoveries, what you're looking for is favorable vein jogs. And that's basically where the vein, goes like this and then suddenly opens up and allows fluids to come up the system, form a silver shoot. So on surface, you're looking for things like, you have the main vein and you're looking for a smaller bisecting vein. And it's at those intersections where sometimes the vein, if it's a favorable stratosphere, it'll open up, you get the fluids up. So it's through a lot of intense mapping and sampling. Geochem, this is an area that's located next to Mexico's third largest open pit copper mine, the Piedras Verdes mine. Everything is copper rich. This is a copper silver system. We have base metals as well. We have gold at depth, but your highest grade copper, it comes along with your highest grade silver. And due to that sort of mineralogy we're seeing in the vein systems, mag doesn't show off much, and if it shows off much, it shows off everything, silver shoots and otherwise. So it's really just getting down there, mapping, sampling on surface, and then generating drill targets from that.
Fantastic. One last question then. Drill costs in the area. What do you pay? And I'm assuming it's mostly RC, or are you diamond drilling?
Actually, it's all diamond,
Diamond. Okay,
and
fantastic.
it's all man portable. My background is man portable drills. I worked at a man portable drill contractor for 10 years, so I love man portables because it gets a lot of the community out there working, moving drill rigs. No surface impact really to speak of, no environmental impact. So on diamond, we drill everything from H to through to B on the deepest holes. I think our current contract is about 250 Canadian all in per meter, any core size. And that includes, that's all in. So that's water trucks, assaying costs, all those kinds of things as well. So I think it's a pretty competitive rate for this landscape now, where there's obviously a lot of money being raised, and a lot of drill activity perking up everywhere in Mexico.
Okay. Very last question. Did you secure any lap capacity at all, or are you just going to be at the mercy of the labs at that time?
You know what? We'll be at the mercy of the labs. There is a prep facility in, I believe it is Ciudad Obregón, which is a city about an hour north of us, in ALS prep. But it ultimately, after it goes through the prep facility, it goes to Vancouver at ALS Chemics for assaying. We've looked at some of the smaller assay groups that have capacity, but in our opinion, you want the gold standard for assays. If it costs a bit more, let's get it done properly. And we're a bit at the mercy of them. I know ALS still has some COVID issues in their office in Hermosillo and Obregon, and that slows down the process. But that's part of life.
Gotcha. Darrell, I think we covered a lot of ground here. We talked use of proceeds. We talked about the bought deal financing. You said a lot of interest also coming in from the US, which is interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Well, time to start drilling. Time to get going. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for answering all my questions and running us through the Minaurum story and giving us an update here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kai. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And everybody else, thanks for tuning in. This was SF Live episode 192 with Darrell Rader, President and CEO of Minaurum Gold. And make sure to follow the company. Ticker is MGG on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Twitter, of course, as well, at Soar Financial, or on youtube.com/Soar Financial as well. Turn on the bell notification. We do all our interviews live. That way you do get a prompt on your screen when we, but you have it. You have the advantage. Use it to your advantage.